Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the chapter 12, part C, the last part that we're going to cover in terms of your central nervous system for chapter 12. So we're going to get into this. We are recording. Okay, we're good. So, part C, central nervous system, functional brain systems. Okay, we have the limbic system and reticular formation. When we think of, well, let's just start talking anatomically and then we'll say, what is limbic system? We're looking at structures. System usually involves more than one thing, right? So limbic system, what is it going to be composed of? Structures on medial aspects of cerebral hemispheres in diencephalon. So this diencephalon, you keep hearing about it. It keeps taking place. Fornix. Fornix is going to be something you're going to need to identify in your lab exams. So make sure you know where that is. Fiber tract that links limbic system regions. A track that links the limbic system regions. Okay, includes parts of diencephalon and some cerebral structures that encircle the brainstem. So now let's start thinking of what is this limbic system? What is it doing? The limbic system is largely responsible for emotions or the affective brain, like the amygdaloid. The amygdaloid body recognizes anger or fearful facial expressions. This helps you assess whether you're going to be in danger or possibly you might have a fear response. Individuals that are unable to recognize someone who is angry or different types of facial expressions may have part of the limbic system, specifically the amygdaloid body, possibly damaged, or there could be something wrong there, which they're able to assess these things. The cingulate gyrus plays a role in expressing emotions via gestures and resolves mental conflict. Plays a role in expressing, not recognizing, but expressing emotions. Not recognizing emotions or expressions, but expressing. So see the key word here. Amygdaloid recognizes, cingulate, expressing. So this is the limbic system. As I mentioned, it has more than one part, right? So make sure you know your parts in terms of the limbic system, the anatomical locations. So I put this here, so you maybe want to write in your notes. As I said, I'll still give you a PDF file containing the figures, but you will be tested on figure 12.17 in terms of the anatomical locations involving the limbic system. All right, we mentioned emotion. Well, you have an emotion or emotional response to even, let's say, odors. If you go to a restaurant, you get a plate, and as they put it in front of you, you smell something and smells bad, it's going to create a response. You may move back, and you may say, this is not a good thing. So for example, like a skunk, you're going to stay back. You're going to try to stay back. Now, most output relate via the hypothalamus. So we discussed the hypothalamus, and hypothalamus plays a role in the psychosomatic illnesses. So psycho meaning mind, somatic body. So psychomatic meaning mind and body. So what are these somatic disorders? This is stuff that I've added for you. So these are usually diseases which involve both mind and body. So some physical diseases are thought to be particularly prone to being made worse by mental factors such as stress and anxiety. So your mental state can affect how bad a physical disease is at a given time. We see this happen specifically, let's say, in the COVID-19 situation. Psychosomatic results. We see psychosomatic disorders where people are in hospitals and they're not allowed to see their loved ones, or their loved ones are not allowed to see them, more specifically, right? So, hey, they get a little down, a little stressed, a little anxiety, depression, and it can make their situation worse, made worse. Now, limbic system, remember, it interacts also with prefrontal lobes. But let's go back and take a look at this, right? So we have this part here, all this being part of limbic system. So it also allows us to react emotionally to things we consciously understand to be happening. All right, so the hippocampus and the amygdaloid body also play a role in memory. Reticular formation. This one's going to extend through central core of brainstem. Okay, it's going to extend to the central core of brainstem. So let's look into some of the function in terms of reticular formation. We have motor function. So we've discussed already, remember what that is, motor function. Motor function of reticular formations helps control coarse limb movements via the reticulospinal tracts. So here are some things that are autonomic, reticular autonomic centers. For example, we have vasomotor centers. We also looked at cardiac centers and respiratory centers. These are the roles reticular formation also plays. Just spend a little time on this figure. It's not something we're going to have in your lab. That's why you don't see the lab part. But make sure you just take some time to go through process 1, 2, and 3. Won't be on your exam, but it's good for understanding. This table is very important. Table 12.1-1. This one breaks down major brain regions and their functions. Cortical gray matter functions in intellectual and emotional processing. Basal nuclei, aka ganglia, help control skeletal muscle movements. Thalamus, involved in memory processing. Hypothalamus. Wow, now that one does a lot, doesn't it? That's the main head honcho in terms of your autonomic nervous system, homeostasis regulator, regulating temperature, food intakes, biorhythms, hormone inputs, outputs, endocrine. I mean, it does a lot behind the scenes without us consciously having to do anything. Then now we are in the limbic system, limbic. And as I told you before, when you think limbic, boom, emotional, mediates emotional responses. And I said also involved in some memory processing. This is your limbic system. We also already covered midbrain pons, medulla oblongata, reticular formation. Again, here helps regulate skeletal and visceral muscle activity. That's the one that we just covered, reticular formation. So know this table because you will be tested on this. And the cerebellum. We talked about it being responsible for balance and posture. We also talked about impacts to the cerebellum region and what that can do to an individual. Now we're going to look into other things as we proceed through this presentation. We're going to look at some language, memory, brain waves, consciousness, different sleep cycles and awake cycles. So when we think of language, we have usually it's going to be involving the cortex of the left hemisphere. So language involving cortex of left hemisphere. For example, Broca's area. So this is involved in the speech production. So patients with a lesion in Broca's understand words but are unable to speak because of the inhibition of the production, speech production. Now, Wernicke's area involved in understanding spoken and written words. So understanding spoken and written words. So here I put IE, in other words, Wernicke's aphasia, where a person has is saying words that are nonsensical. All right, so that is Wernicke's aphasia. Make sure you know this picture here, the 12.78. This one also will talk about, for example, this is the parts of the Wernicke's area. Right here, we have our vision area. Near the temporal area here, we have hearing, right? We have our taste around here. And we just covered, what's the other part of speech? Here we are, Broca's area. So speech right here and right here, right? Let's talk about memory. Why? Well, the limbic system. We know limbic system has to do with emotion, emotional responses, how we are going to be receiving them in terms of integration of information that we are observing, the facial expression of the individual, and how we express ourselves. But as I mentioned before, limbic system also involved in some memory. That is why we have memory right here. So storage and retrieval of information. Please know your different kinds of information. Declarative, involving memories of facts, procedural, motor memory, emotional memory. Make sure you know these. Now, you can't talk about memory without discussing short-term memory and long-term memory. And I think most of us kind of know the differences of them. So short-term memory, we're going to have temporary holding of information. Most of you are probably going to go through this course in terms of memory with short-term memory because of your study habits. And let's just be honest, most of us go through academics like that for short-term memory. We're trying to just survive, responsibilities, and so forth. And as a result, due to the lack of practices to create long-term memory, we then fall into a short-term memory, which is not a good thing in terms of those that want to be involved in human health. We want to try to put things in long-term memory, but it's also natural for a first-timer in A&P to put things into short-term memory because the best memory is the memory that is built through repetition, exercise. exercising your mind, practicing it, going through problem solving tasks. And that is how we have long-term memory. Riding a bike. If you haven't ridden a bike in years and you get on it and you're able to ride that bike, why? Because you've fallen, you've hurt yourself on the bike before. Those of us who've ridden a bike all have fallen. So through that exercise, through that repetitiveness, you learn, oh boy, I'm not going to do that. You do a correction, and you're going to remember that correction because it hurt when you fell. And as a result, you have this long-term memory, which is really amazing. Factors affecting the transfer from this short term to the long term. Now, this would be good. These are great study tips. This particular slide. Your emotional state, how you approach this class in terms of your emotional state has a lot to do with the learning process. It has a lot to do with if you're going to stay in the short-term memory or convert short-term to long-term. Your emotional state. Are you walking into this class saying, oh boy, dreading it, negative, not motivated? If that's the case, congratulations. You will probably stay in short-term memory and will not make the leap to long-term memory. If you are not practicing repetition, visual, if you can see, if you're fortunate enough to see and hear, and you're not doing vision and audio practice, probably going to stay in short term. You want to mix up the different types of practices of learning and repetition. Association, trying new information with old memories. The things that you have learned, can you add any information on top of that? Can you make any associations with the short-term memory you have with something that you've applied in your job, your life, your family? Have you ever seen Slumdog Millionaire, the movie? About that little kid who goes to the show and they ask him questions and he keeps getting all the questions right. How does he do that? How did he get all these questions right? And they think he's a genius. What was it? Every question he was asked, he had some sort of association to an old memory. It's a good movie. Slumdog Millionaire. Slumdog Millionaire is the name of the movie. And then we have the autonomic memory, subconscious information stored in long-term memory. We also have memory consolidation involves fitting new facts into categories already stored in cerebral cortex. We talked about how important this is, right? We've talked about cerebral cortex, super important. Let's get into a little bit of the clinicals here. So we're going to talk about damage to the hippocampus or surrounding temporal lobe structures on either side, resulting in memory loss. So bilateral destruction causes widespread amnesia. There are different types of amnesia. For example, anterior grade amnesia. So consolidated memories are not lost, but new inputs are not associated with the old one. This is a type of amnesia. So what does this mean? Consolidated memories are not lost, but new inputs are not associated with the old one. In essence, a person lives in the here and now, where a memory or a conversation that just happened 5 minutes before would not be remembered. Okay, anterior grade amnesia. Retrograde amnesia. Memory, loss of memories formed in the distant past. So we have anterior grade, retrograde. Now we're going to dive into brain waves I wish we could spend a lot of time discussing this, but I'm just going to mention a few things. Normal brain functions are continuous. Okay? Normal brain functions are continuous. So we use an electroencephalogram. Look at this word. Remember that? Remember diencephalon? Encephalogram. Electroencephalogram. Just pointing out a word in there. So we can use this to measure electrical activity within the brain in order to assess how it's functioning. So we can look at this technology for diagnosing, evaluating epilepsy, sleep disorders. We can even somewhat localize lesions, tumors, anaphylaxis, infections, abscesses. Now, this presentations in your also in your B and C presentation mentions this lesion. I have noticed this. They put lesion and then they put it next with tumors. I felt the need to kind of make additional notes on this here in case you're wondering what is this. Lesion, an area of abnormal tissue. A lesion may be benign, non-cancerous, or malignant, meaning cancerous. Well, the same thing can be said about a tumor. A tumor can be benign, a tumor can be malignant. So I just they're very similar, okay? They're similar in terms of meaning. Now, in the infarct, localized area of dead tissue, abscess, a swollen area within body tissue, usually containing an accumulation of pus. So these are some terms I decided to throw in there. The EEG is going to be measuring patterns of neuronal electrical activity, right? So we're looking at electrical activity. And each person's brain waves are unique. We measure these in a frequency known as hertz. Frequency known as hertz. Let's get into another clinical here, an epileptic seizure. A torrent of electrical discharges by groups of neurons. So you're getting this surge of electrical discharges, and there is a prevention of other messages from getting through. So you lose homeostasis. Lose homeostasis. Some individuals that experience epilepsy may lose consciousness. They could kind of fall stiffly, or they may experience uncontrollable jerking. It depends the type of epilepsy. Very important. There are different types of epilepsy. Approximately 1% of the population experiences some form of epilepsy. We have aura. It may precede the seizure. So it's a sensory hallucination. Absent seizures. These are mild seizures of young children. And what happens there, their expressions usually go blank. Yeah, sometimes it's happening in school. And these can go sometimes unchecked, undiagnosed. If a teacher is not aware of it, the teacher may say, oh, the little kid's blanked out. He needs to go to bed more. He he needs to go to bed earlier. He was just staring, and that was not the case. It could have been this mild form of a seizure, absence of seizures. Tonic-clonic seizures. These are the ones that are very dangerous. These can last a few minutes. The individual most likely loses consciousness, can cause severe damage to the body, bruising, even possibly broken bones, depend on how they fell or how they're moving. There is loss of bladder control. I have a personal story regarding this. One of my very good friends, we were in San Antonio, we were by the Riverwalk, and I was next to her. She was standing next to a chair and a table, and she started going into absence seizure. She had this blank stare. Luckily, I realized that this was going to occur. Did I know her history? Yes, but it had been many, 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 many years. She actually had brain surgery to help her get control of these seizures. She was losing memory, more and more memory every time she had a seizure. She went into tonic-clonic seizure. I grabbed her, she got stiff, and I was struggling to hold her because she was wearing a very tight silk dress, like body tight, and I was struggling to hold her as she was slipping through my arms. I was trying to gently put her down on the floor, and after I put her down and my friends and I kind of got control of the situation, I realized that I felt wet and cold. Well, she was wearing this skirt, tight body skirt, and lost bladder control, and I got bladder content on me, all over me, from waist down. So personal experience, these things do happen, and these are the most severe ones. What initiated this? She had gone over 8 years without it. We went to a river walk. We went up, we had eaten lunch with a group of friends. We all decided, her idea. We went upstairs, and there was kind of a little dance area. There was a strobe light. The strobe light affected her, and it caused this seizure. There are different types well, you can have certain types of drugs in order to control epilepsy. There's also certain implantations. She does not have any type of implantation. Now, I think we all kind of understand that a fainting, right? It's going to be a brief loss of consciousness. There could be different types of reasons for fainting. Often, most often, they're going to be due to an inadequate cerebral blood flow. That's just the way it is, or low blood pressure. Coma, unconsciousness for an extended period of time. It is not the same as deep sleep. And actually, an individual in a coma has the oxygen consumption is lower. Brain death. Complicated situation, but it is irreversible. And then there is a lot of ethical, legal issues surrounding this topic in terms of, is the person breathing by themselves? How long do you keep the person there? It's complicated stuff. let's get into the sleep part. We have two main types of sleep. Non-REM, so the non-rapid eye movement sleep. It's broken into 4 stages. I'm not gonna ask you about the 4 stages, but you do need to know the 2 types of sleep. And we have the rapid eye movement. Most dreams occur in REM. Just want to point out that most dreams are going to be occurring during REM. All right, my alarm came off, and I want to, okay. All right. So I'm going to restart. I'm going to stop this, record it, and I'm going to load this up and we'll pick up here.